Too busy trying to survive a kaiju attack to watch a full-length HMS video? Don't worry, relief is on the way. Check out this Cliff Notes version of our Giant Monsters video, and then stay tuned for a doctorate level selection. Hello everybody and welcome back to the Horror Movie Syllabus. My name is Professor Victor and I'll be your host as we go through all the essential, noteworthy, interesting, and notorious modern horror films. If you're new, I recommend you check out the introduction video. There's a link to it in the description below and gives you a pretty good idea of what we normally do on the Horror Movie Syllabus. But today, what we're doing is a little bit different. We're doing our Cliff Notes version of a particular subgenre of horror where we recap a previous video that we've done and then we add a fourth doctorate level selection to that subgenre. This time what we're doing is we're recapping our Giant Monsters video that we did a while back. And for those who haven't seen it and want to get caught up, and basically we're going to just kind of quickly recap the three movies we talked about in that video, and then we're going to talk about a new fourth doctorate level. So for those of you that already saw the movie, there is something more for you as well. So when we talked about Giant Monsters back in the day, what we talked about was really, they're kind of like a staple of horror movies. They're kind of a classic thing. They've been around almost as long as horror movies have been around. They got really popular in the 1950s, but they've endured. They've endured as a classic staple monster, and they're always a tremendous amount of fun. Basically, the idea of the destruction that can be caused by a giant monster is something that just appeals to us. It always has, it probably always will, and it makes for some very entertaining movies. We looked at three such movies like that when we were talking about the giant monster subgenre, so why don't we go ahead and just jump into the recap for that right now. The first giant monster movie we talked about was a movie called Tremors. And Tremors is something of a cult favorite. We talked about that quite a bit. How the movie really found its audience as a horror comedy, starring the great Kevin Bacon and a cast of very memorable characters, including most notably Michael Gross, who we spent a lot of time talking about as the gun-loving Bert. And it really is a kind of movie that should have been a throwaway, but really clicked with audiences. It really is just a great blend of fun and campy horror that has managed to spawn out sequel after sequel after sequel, and they're still doing them because there's still love for them. I love the series. I think it's great. I talked about how it took me a little while to find the love for that kind of campy horror back in the 90s. When that movie came out, I wasn't quite there, but I've gotten there and I really like it. And this is a great example of it. It's got a legion of followers. It's a fun series and it's a fun movie. And we talked quite a bit about just how much fun it's having. It knows that it's having fun, but it also knows to give you enough scare, enough grossness to make it both comedy and horror. Definitely want to check out. The next giant monster movie that we talked about was Cloverfield. And Cloverfield was a big hit when it came out, and it was due in large part to the marketing, the mystery of what was the movie going to be about, and the name J.J. Abrams, who was high off the success of Lost, was really the big selling point of that movie, and it for the most part delivered. Back then found footage was still somewhat of a new thing. It really hadn't played out yet, and so it just felt like a fresh idea at the time, and it was a fun way to have a monster movie from the ground level, really literally seeing it through the eyes of people who would be on the ground being affected by the giant monster. And then the decision to hide that monster for most of the movie and just give you glimpses of it was a really good way to build up the suspense and really really added to the atmosphere of the movie. We talked about how successful that first movie was in doing that, and how the franchise that's been built off of it has some really big highs and some really big lows. The second movie is fantastic. Third movie, really not. But the whole movie itself, the whole Cloverfield experience, is something that should definitely be enjoyed and checked out if you can handle the motion sickness. And I did talk a lot about how I actually, for a rare time, got the motion sickness from that movie. So be forewarned if you're going to check that one out. And the last giant monster movie we talked about was The Host. And The Host is a South Korean import monster movie, giant monster movie, and it is absolutely fantastic. Like so many of the great South Korean horror movies, blends genres so well. So it's not just horror, but it's also comedy and action and drama, and it does so seamlessly. And the Host is an excellent example of this. It's also got some wonderful, wonderful performances in it. Everything in that movie was run really, really well. Even the CGI, which isn't flawless or perfect, it's a little dated and probably wasn't that great at the time, is still good enough to immerse you in the story because everything else is firing on all cylinders. Thanks to director Bong Joon-ho of Parasite fame. He is a master, and he is got all his skills on display in this movie. This is one that a lot of people haven't seen because it is, a South Korean import, and I implore you to check it out if you haven't already because the host is phenomenal. So those are the three movies that we discussed during our initial Giant Monsters video, and now we're going to add a fourth doctorate level movie to that list right now. Our doctorate level selection for this subgenre is Q, the Winged Serpent. Q, the Winged Serpent came out in 1982 and is one of these cult classic movies that I think trades maybe a lot on nostalgia as opposed to being a genuinely good movie. And you know what? There ain't nothing wrong with that in my book. I love this movie. If you're not familiar with it, Q, the Winged Serpent, also known just as Q sometimes, is the story of an Aztec god monster named Quetzalcoatl, and beg my pardon if I don't pronounce that correctly, that is terrorizing New York City. And then there's a small time crook played by Michael Moriarty who has some information on where to find the beast, and he's willing to trade it in exchange for different favors and stuff from the city. He's kind of holding the city hostage. Meanwhile, the monster is wreaking havoc, and as always, hijinks abound. Q the Winged Serpent is something of a special movie to me because back in the day when I was a kid, we used to go to the video store. And for those of you who are younger viewers, video stores were these things back in the day where you would go to a physical place and rent a videotape, take it home and put it in. You couldn't stream anything, you know. That's how you found movies. And one of the big funs about going to that store was looking at all the boxes up on the shelf with the cover art and picking the movie you wanted based kind of on its cover, you know, choosing a movie by its poster, you know, and Q the Winged Serpent was one that always appealed to me because it had this winged serpent, this giant lizard-like dragon-looking thing flying by buildings and stuff like that. It just looked super cool, and I was always drawn by it to it, and also a little scared of it as a kid. And so when I finally saw it, it was very very satisfying. Even though like the monster did admittedly kind of freak me out, like it just fly out of the sky and just eat you. As a kid, kind of realistic looking and everything like that. As an adult, that's not realistic at all. The effects in this movie are quaint. That's the word I'm going to use for it. It's quaint. The monster going out and plucking people out of the sky and munching them is all just really kind of fun and cute at this point. The monster is done with stop motion animation, and so it doesn't look realistic at all. It's not like like the CGI you would see now in things like Harry Potter or whatever with dragons and things. This is definitely much cruder than that, and that is a big part of the charm and a big part of why I still like this movie to this day. I do love stop motion animation. It's kind of the lost art form in this day and age, but it lends itself to a certain charm. It's quaint. It's cute. The monster is a lot of fun to watch. It's not realistic at all. It's not scary at all, but it's awesome. It's really neat. It's really neat to see the way it moves, the way it looks. Like it just looks super cool, even though it doesn't look realistic at all. It's just if you appreciate special effects and miniature work and things like that, modeling and everything like that, how could you not love this kind of movie? How could you not love seeing this monster being realized on the screen? It's fantastic. Now, as an adult, some of the things that I probably didn't appreciate as a kid, I appreciate more now. Namely, Michael Moriarty. He's fantastic in the movie, making the most out of a kind of a weird kind of flatter role. This crook who's trying to get over on the city by withholding this information and the struggles that he's having in his home life and everything. He really brings a pathos and a gravitas to this character that it frankly doesn't deserve for this B movie plot. Like it really doesn't deserve it. But man, he's given his all. And he's outshining other actors in the movie that are also quality. Guys like Richard Roundtree and David Carradine. These are good actors. Again, kind of in a way kind of slumming in this movie, but everybody's taking it so seriously. And I credit director Larry Cohen for this. Larry Cohen, who is kind of a beloved horror director slash producer slash writer, horror and sci-fi stuff. Like if you don't know Larry Cohen, you dig into him because he's really fascinating. He's done some fun things. And I think we'll probably wind up talking about him again if we haven't already. But I think that he deserves a lot of the credit for making this movie better than it should be. It's a schlocky monster movie, but he tried to give it some tension and some heart and some pathos. Really, he made a couple of interesting characters to kind of string this story along, and not just have it be a monster eating people. Which there's something to be said for monsters just eating people. Looking at you, Godzilla. But I think that this added a lot to the movie, and as an adult watching it, gives me something to latch onto for the times when the monster's not on the screen. It also helps that Cohen was able to film at like real locations like the Chrysler Building. I found that up. I'm looking at the the Wikipedia page, but that's fascinating because like first of all, he probably shouldn't have been allowed to do that, but it also just adds something to the movie. It adds a little bit more verisimilitude, a little bit more substance to it. Again, elevating it from just total schlock to something a little bit more than that. This is a cult movie. It's a campy movie because it's aged poorly, but it's better than you remember it being, I'd say. And I know it's got its fans. I know I'm not the only one in this, saying that this movie is worth checking out. But if you haven't seen Q and you can get behind a dated movie with dated special effects, check this one out. I think you'll have a good time. It's definitely not going to scare you. It's not even going to be all that gory or anything. But I think you'll find it charming. I think you'll find it fun. I think you'll find the acting to be surprisingly good. And it's a very well made, well paced movie. I think that overall, you'll be surprised at how quality this is, considering it's not very high quality. So if you haven't seen it, check it out and let us know what you think. But if you have seen it, of course, in the comments, tell me, do you agree? Is Q definitely worth our doctorate level selection? And not a lot of people have seen it, but I think it has endured. So that's our doctorate level selection for the giant monsters subgenre, but I've also got an extra credit movie for you as well. Our extra credit movie is called Colossal. And Colossal is a 2016 movie that is admittedly not really much of a horror movie. It's really more of a comedy slash drama movie about giant monsters. It's a little hard to categorize this one, which is part of what I like about it. But it's mostly here because I just really, really like this movie and I feel like talking about it. If you're not familiar with it, the movie stars Anne Hathaway as an alcoholic woman who gets dumped by her boyfriend, husband, I can't remember, and winds up moving back to her hometown where she gets a job with an old high school friend. But when she gets drunk and winds up wandering through a playground in her neighborhood, it triggers a giant kaiju monster in Korea that wreaks havoc. And she becomes aware that she is controlling this monster. Her movements in the sandbox mirror the movements of the monster in Korea. And that realization leads to some very strange shenanigans and happenings and hijinks abounding. But I don't want to spoil the movie for you because it's absolutely great. I love Colossal. This is a movie that caught me off guard. I had heard just the general log line of it, the premise. Anne Hathaway plays a woman who can control a kaiju. I'm in. As we talked about recently, I love Anne Hathaway. I think she's great. She's one of my favorite actresses. And her doing a movie like this is really kind of against type. This is not what you really think of when you think of Anne Hathaway. First of all, playing a flawed character like this, who's got this drinking problem and these issues, is not something she hasn't done before. But doing it in this kind of like weird comedy drama horror thing is not something that we normally see Anne Hathaway doing. And then it's got Jason Sudeikis as the friend, everybody's favorite football coach, and he's doing great work as too. Also playing a little bit against type because he's not as likable and charming as he often is in his work. So I don't want to spoil things too much, but interesting movie. It's a really bizarre concept. I don't know how you come up with this one. It's just a weird, simple concept that winds up lending itself to some really fun things and some interesting existential questions as well. The movie is, again, it's not really scary at all. It's really kind of maybe more funny and a little bit sad than it is scary, but it is giant monsters. You know what I mean? It's giant kaiju. It's a giant monster movie. So I'm going to count it anyways. And I love the ending. I think it wraps up really, really well. It's got a couple of great performances at heart. It's made well. The effects look good. Like the monster looks pretty cool. It's kind of funny. I don't know. Maybe the less you know, the better about this movie. So maybe I should just stop here. But I really love the movie. I think it's fantastic. And I highly recommend it. Again, I know I'm stretching the boundaries of what we call horror. I do it all the time, guys. Like, if you've been watching this, I'm very liberal when it comes to what I call horror. So this one's barely horror at all, but it's 100% worth your time. If you haven't seen Colossal, check it out. If you have seen it, let us know in the comments. Am I being overly enthusiastic about it as I can tend to be sometimes? Or am I right? Is this a lot of fun? Is this a good movie that people should check out? Let us know in the comments below. So that's going to do it for our recap and additional doctorate selections for the giant monster subgenre. I hope that you've enjoyed this because I have. And if you like us, go back and revisit the original video because we had a lot more to talk about. I only summarized it here. And now it's time for us to look at another horror trivia question. It's that time of the video where I try to answer a horror trivia pursuit question live on camera. You guys get to see if I'm successful or not, and you guys can play along. I'm going to go ahead and give you some time to think and come up with your own answer, and then, let me know in the comments if you got it right or not on our system, of course. We're obviously going to go with the monster category on the card, and interesting. So here's the question. 2010's Let Me In was a remake of what Swedish film? And at first I thought this was a repeat question, like I maybe grabbed this card previously, but it's not. We've had another question about this property before. And so I my first look at it, I thought, oh, we've done this one before. No, we haven't. We actually have not done this question before. We've just had another question about this franchise before. I know the answer to this question. I'm kind of just giving you guys time to think about it. If you guys maybe don't know off the top of your head and you're trying to think about it, but Let Me In. Let Me In was a remake of a Swedish film, just like the question says, and it starred Chloe Grace Moretz and Cody Smith-McPhee. I believe we've talked about it. In fact, I'm like 99% sure we've already talked about it, and if not, we will be. But I'm pretty sure we talked about this one already, and we talked about the original one already. I know that for sure. So we've talked about both the original and the remake in the video. So if you've been watching, you should already know the answer to this question, or you probably already knew it anyways, because a lot of you are, horror fans. You guys would know this one. By the way, I think Let Me In, the remake is actually excellent. I talked about that previously, but the original, man, the original is a gorgeous, moving, haunting film. Do you know what it is? I know what it is, and I think it's time for us to answer. I think I've killed enough time. The answer, of course, is Let the Right One In. And, yep, Let the Right One In, 2008. God, that's a good movie. Arguably one of the best vampire movies ever, even though I didn't put it in the vampire subgenre. Go check out those videos if you want to know more about that. But yeah, Let the Right One In, fantastic movie. Let Me In, really good remake. Kind of took a little bit of a slightly different tack on that. Go watch my remix video to hear more about that. I think it's in the remix video. If it's not, my apologies, but I'll leave. If it's not, I'll put a little comment right here telling you what video it's actually in, but I'm pretty sure it's in the remix video. So that's going to do it for our whole video. Next week, we're going to get back to a full-length video talking about a new subgenre of horror. So until then, class dismissed.